Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Samantha Simmons. We start in the Middle East, and the Israeli military says its forces have taken control of the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing, which borders Egypt and southern Gaza. These are the latest pictures that show the view at the crossing from on board an Israeli military vehicle. Aid organisations operating there say the flow of aid into the territory through the crossing has now stopped. Israel continued to bombard Rafah overnight after rejecting a ceasefire proposal which was put forward by international mediators and agreed by Hamas. Israel says the plan doesn't meet its core demands. Israel is, though, sending a delegation to indirect talks in Cairo. Well, we've had this update from our correspondent Fergal Keane in Jerusalem.
They haven't had reason to dance for a long time, but they haven't forgotten how. Even amid uncertainty about Israel's position, hope springs. Across Gaza, BBC journalists captured the reaction of those convinced, perhaps prematurely, that a ceasefire will happen.
The feeling is indescribable. We're so happy we're going back to our home in Gaza City.
We're refugees from the north and we fled here, this young man says. We're so happy there's a ceasefire. Israelis are still absorbing the news. It came late on one of this society's most important days, when across the country sirens bring the nation to a halt in memory of the dead of the Holocaust. A day of reflection in a country traumatised by the Hamas attack last October. Tonight on the streets of Tel Aviv, those who believe healing that trauma can begin with a ceasefire deal and the release of Israel's hostages.
We expect from the Israeli government to take this deal to save all the remaining hostages who are still alive.
But after 7 months of a war in which Israel's army pledged to destroy Hamas, a ceasefire deal that fails to accomplish that risks breaking Israel's wartime coalition government. Israel will send negotiators to talks but won't stop fighting yet.
We examine every proposal very seriously, and we review every possibility on the issue of negotiations and the return of the hostages to their homes as quickly as possible and as a central task. At the same time, we carry on with our operations in the Gaza Strip and will continue to do so.
The people of eastern Rafah woke to leaflets telling them to evacuate. Many have been displaced before, but still they were told to leave. Everyone, no matter how old, how young, or how vulnerable.
ومعنا صغارنا واطفالنا ومرتي وامي والعيله وكلنا والله ما احنا عارفين نروح مش عارفين وين نروح.
To Al-Mawasi, Israel says, and other desolate places beyond Rafah. The so-called humanitarian zones were to be expanded, but they've never been safe from sickness, hunger, or war. This is the aftermath of raids on Rafah last night. People hope these may have been some of the last airstrikes if the ceasefire can be made to work. News of the Hamas announcement was still hours away. Nisreen Raja, mother and refugee. For 7 months, this has been the daily reality. Hani Ashtar, an orphan, grieved by his relative Reem. His family was killed during the war, she says. Even he was killed. So many here are grieving and exhausted. Late tonight, Israel attacked eastern Rafah, where they told people to leave. Celebration had turned to fear, and the hope that tomorrow might bring peace. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Let's show you the scene live in Rafah right now, where we can smoke rising into the air there. This comes after the Israeli Defence Forces said it does have operational control of the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing, following the announcement that the IDF was having targeted strikes against Hamas in eastern Rafah. While in the past few hours, the military have said that their forces were scanning the area after launching this ground and air operation in parts of eastern Rafah on Monday. This is, as we know, diplomatic efforts are continuing to try and achieve a new truce. Well, let's speak to Louise Wateridge from UNRWA, who joins me now from Rafah. Louise, welcome to you. Tell us what the situation is there right now where you are.
Yeah, things are very tense here in Rafah. The last 24 hours have been a complete roller coaster of emotion. Even the last few days, there was so much hope for a ceasefire. Anybody you speak to here, the last week, the last few months, every day, all they want to know is when there is a ceasefire coming. And it's what everybody's been hoping for. So to wake up yesterday morning to the devastating news that leaflets had been dropped and an evacuation order was in place, it really spread a lot of fear across the community. I'm currently in Western Rafah, but across Eastern Rafah, people started to move. But even outside my window, I was able to see people starting to take down their makeshift shelters, start to pack up and start to leave Rafah. So there's a lot of fear spreading. Throughout the day, you could see more and more people starting to move, starting to leave. And then last night, out of seemingly nowhere, for myself, the first I heard of it was screaming and cheering out of the window. I was completely overcome with emotion. Everyone around, you could see women and children hugging each other, crying, families coming together, just this outpour of relief that people have held for so long at the hope of a potential ceasefire. And then today, this morning, very subdued, very quiet. As the day has gone on, I've seen again more and more vehicles move out of the Rafah area as people are packing up their things and leaving. So there is a sense of fear and chaos now. Obviously, this is a minute by minute, hour by hour situation developing. But clearly people are hearing the situation at the Rafah border crossing and now deciding to leave once again.
And tell us what the aid situation is like, because more aid had been getting in the past few weeks, hadn't it? What's the aid situation there now?
So there is now no aid entering the Gaza Strip. The Rafah crossing is the biggest and the only entry that UNRWA, the largest humanitarian agency here in Gaza, has been using. And now there is no aid able to get in. And in addition to that, there is also no fuel. So fuel is really what the agencies need to run this massive humanitarian operation across the Gaza Strip. Fuel is what's needed to run the trucks to get the aid to the people who need it. Fuel is needed in the generators to run the hospitals and health clinics that are remaining and not damaged and destroyed. So without this fuel and without these aid supplies, the aid operation here is simply going to ground to a halt.
What is the aid operation like at the moment?
We continue to do everything we can. Our colleagues are providing services. UNRWA runs health centres across the Gaza Strip. Even in North Gaza, we have some very heroic colleagues who have maintained running these health services throughout the war. So we do our best to provide these services and provide what aid we have. But it's very concerning to know that this border crossing is closed and that there is no foreseeable aid entering anytime soon.
OK, thank you very much for telling us about the situation where you are. Louise Wateridge from UNRWA, who is in Rafah. Thank you. Well, let's get more on this with our correspondent in Jerusalem, Yolande Nell. Yolande, welcome to you. What are the authorities there saying about why they've closed the crossing or taken control of this crossing between Egypt and Rafah, and about the IDF operation in Rafah?
So the Israeli army has put out footage that shows these Israeli tanks rolling into this key crossing, the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt. It says it's taken operational control there, and it's dealing, it says, with Hamas terrorist infrastructure, to use its language, in that area. It says it's killed 20 Hamas terrorists overnight, and that it has also found 3 tunnel shafts, and it's linking operations around this part of Rafah to the rocket fire that it says came from this area decried by Hamas on Sunday, which killed 4 Israeli soldiers close to the Kerem Shalom crossing, leading to the closure of that important crossing in the south of the Gaza Strip as well. Now, at the moment, when we're taking briefings from the Israeli military, they're stressing that this is a very precise, it's a limited operation. They're not putting a time frame on it. They said too that they are working to reopen the Kerem Shalom crossing as security allows.
And tell us more about this potential ceasefire deal, which Hamas said it supports. Israel says it goes a long way from meeting its demands. We understand that unofficial talks are still going to take place today in Cairo. What more do we know about that?
Well, at the moment, this ceasefire deal is really hanging in the balance because of the different positions we had. You know, that declaration from Hamas, it was quite dramatic, saying it agreed to what the mediators had proposed. Israel coming out quickly and denying that this was the proposal that it had signed up to, saying that there were differences from its core demands. But we also have had, confusingly, some officials coming out and saying, no, this is actually very similar to the proposal that was put forward by Israel itself at the end of last month. It does seem really that the fundamental difficulty for Israel is signing up to any kind of phased deal of a ceasefire and hostage release that will ultimately lead to an end to hostilities, an end to this war before, in the eyes of the Israeli government, it has achieved its war aim of dismantling Hamas in Gaza. It said that is necessary to have a victory in this war.